In this video, we'll talk about list comprehension, which is a very streamlined way and powerful way of making a list. It's a common programming task to make a list, and you often do that by going through a for loop. You start with a blank list. You go through a for loop, and you append items to the end of your list. Here we're appending the square of I. And that makes a list, and has a list of perfect squares. In Python, there's something called a list comprehension, which does all of this in one line. Like, look at this for loop. It has for I in range 5, and this list comprehension also has for I in range 5. So this does the same thing. It loops over 5 times. This is the I squared part, and that's what this thing returns. So for every I, it puts an I squared into the list, and here's where the brackets are. So this syntax really mirrors a for loop, and if I run it, the perfect squares here will be the same. Let me print the second one again. Is going to be the same here. So this list comprehension does the same as a for loop, and having it in one line saves time and makes it really efficient. And it doesn't have to just return a number. Here, you have a for loop that goes in this range, and it returns a tuple. And it has the x value from the for loop, and x squared plus 3, so it's going to be the coordinates of a parabola. Now, just to be clear, let me show you what that for loop would look like if I make it here explicitly. So I'd pretty much have the same thing, and I'd start with a blank, and let's make a new variable, just call it P. Start with a blank list, and I'd append the x, which is the for loop variable, and I'd print my x squared plus 3. I'm sorry, append. And let me just append with the parentheses. Again, sometimes tuples need the parentheses and sometimes they don't. Here, inside a list comprehension, tuples do. And so this is done. When it's done going through a list, I'll print P. And these two are equivalent. So here's the list of the coordinates, and here's the same list of coordinates when I printed P. Here, just another example, I'm taking these parabola coordinates, which are a tuple, and just like in a for loop, you can go through the tuple, or you can have the two variables there, which means that the tuple will be unpacked. So the x coordinate will be in x, the y coordinate will be in y, and here we can shift the x coordinate 5, so this will shift the parabola over. So this shifted parabola, the x's are shifted over by 5, the y values still stay the same. And once you get used to this, you won't go back to the long way of doing it. This just seems verbose, and this seems clean. And likewise, you don't even have to just have variables here. You notice I did have an expression here. I had x plus 5. But you can do functions here, like I'm looking at this sentence here. I'm splitting it into different words. So this will have a word. The first time around it'll have how, then it'll have I, and this will show you the length of the words. And the length of the words are nyuk, 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 3.14159.265. Sometimes your for loop, if you want to have a square of just even numbers, so you'll still have a for loop, but you'll have an if statement. You'll only append the number if, when you divide it mod 2, the result is 0, which means that it's an even number. And so you'll append the squares of the even numbers here. So this if statement can also be in a list comprehension. So here's a list comprehension normally without the if statement. And you just put on the if condition here, and this will give you just a list of even numbers squared. So that's just 046. And you often even want to loop over two variables. So here we're going to have a matrix. I will go 0, 1, 2. And let's say when I is 0, j will go from 0, 1, 2, 3. So we'll append this, in this little j loop here, we're going to append 0, 0, the tuple was 0, 1, and so forth. We're going to put that all into a list, and the list will be matrix, and I'll print that out. So it's 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and then 1, 0, etc. So this is all the combinations of i's and j's. You can do that with the list comprehension. Again, just kind of look at this and see what's going on. We have two different for loops, and so guess what? In the list comprehension, you just put the two different for loops right after the other, just like it is in our regular for loop, and we're still appending this to the list, ij, and so that's why these two are equivalent. Now you can get fancier and quite complicated, as a matter of fact. There's one example, you can look it up online, where using a list comprehension, you can get a list of primes. It seems crazy, but you can get a list of primes essentially in one statement. Here I'm doing the same things I did before, where I'm looping through i's and j's. But here I'm building up a list. Let me run it so you can see what it'll turn out to be. I'm building up a list that the row is in its own list. So these are the 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. But do you notice that that's in its own list? And then, so each row is a list. So this is a list of lists. The last one was just all of these tuples without any sublists. And the way I do that is by building up a row. And when I'm done appending all the j's, then I append the row. I append a list to the list of matrices. So that's why this thing has three different lists in it. Row 1, 0, row 1, or 2. And so this can do the same thing. And look at this. Here is a list. I'm appending a list. So this right here, is a list, but the rest of it looks okay. I'm just going through all the rows and I'm appending three different lists, but let me undo that. That was wrong. So this is essentially a list comprehension inside a bigger list comprehension. And so this gives the same result. Once things get a little bit tricky like this, it might not be worth doing it because there are some Python values of making sure that it's simple, readable, and maintainable. So even if you can do this, if it feels good and you can understand it and whip it out really quickly, then go for it. Otherwise, it's no problem to just spell it out in a regular for loop.